Today we're talking about another aspect of the INFJ dark side. And most of the time when we talk about the dark side, we're talking about all the pain we could inflict on others, and sometimes they push us to a place where we have to. But today I want to talk to you about something different, something that can be just as detrimental as really actively hurting someone because you feel like you have no other choice. And that is the entire concept of giving away the power to your narrative. So this is all about not feeding others' fantasies and not allowing others to feed your fantasy. Because this is one of the things that feels so natural and so normal, and it feels like this is what we're supposed to do. This is what my intuition is telling me. And we really forget that this is never going to lead us to where we want to be. And because of that, we can not only inflict pain onto ourselves, but onto others. And the most important aspect is we're not going to get to the place where we want to be at. So we think that, feeding others' fantasies, feeding our own fantasies is really the key to everything. And it's not. And I promise you, you're doing this. If you're not doing this, you have been doing this. You've done this multiple times. I know I've done this way too much, way too often. It is probably one of the things I still have to consciously think about because it gets me into so much trouble. So let's talk about it today and find a healthy coping mechanism to really turn this whole thing around and get the life we always dreamed of. Before we get started, remember, if you haven't done this so far, to download the free poster on the INFJ Epic Life formula. So that's all about creating your INFJ epic life. So creating the life that you want in the real world so you can actually feed your own fantasies in a positive way, in a way that it's sustainable and in a way that allows you to continuously grow. And if you want to take it to the next level and get all the insights and go really deep, understand the concept, then get the INFJ Epic Life audio guide. Everything you need to know, you can find in the links in the description. One of the things we INFJs are really skilled at is understanding others, right? We understand their insecurities, we understand where they're coming from, we understand what is missing in their life, and we can become that. And, we've talked about it a lot that this can be our downfall, but let's look at it from the aspect of fantasies. Because at the end of the day, if we're allowing people to continue the way they want to act, we're actually feeding their fantasies. Because we're saying the following: you can act the way you want all the time, and it's going to be okay. There are not going to be any repercussions. There's not going to be negative side effects because you are allowed to be yourself. So why are we saying this? We're saying this because we want to be allowed to be ourselves. But what we have to understand is that although everybody is allowed to be themselves, if we want to connect with others, we also have to make sure that we create healthy boundaries. And some people don't create boundaries in a way of, oh, I'm going to demand all the attention on me. I'm going to do everything I want, and I'm not going to think about what it does to others. And that way they alienate people. We as INFJs, we want to be ourselves all the time, but guess what? We cannot do this either, because if we could be everything we would want to be, we would never put up any boundaries at all. Because this is the fantasy. The fantasy is that I can just allow life to happen, and then there are those beautiful moments and those beautiful, atmospheres and stories and narratives, and, I could just pick everything up. I could allow others to impact me. That would be the ideal utopia of INFJs. But is that really a healthy way to approach reality? Is that really a healthy way to approach relationships? Hopefully, we have learned that this is not the case, because starting off in reality like this, we understand that no, we have to set boundaries. Because if we give away the power to others of how we feel about ourselves, so another person can put us on a pedestal, another person can make us feel like we're the greatest creature ever, but they also will have the power to make us feel like we're nothing. And this is equivalent to all other areas of our lives. So we just have to understand that if we are feeding another person's fantasy, we're telling them, you can continue the way you want and you'll get everything in life. And you don't have to make any adjustments when it comes to how you connect to the real world. And most of the time, it's actually our last function that is, the catapult to all of this. Because if I actually thought of myself the way I am and the way I really appreciate myself, and when I felt the most at peace and where I didn't have to put any effort into connecting with others or create healthy boundaries, it would be my introverted functions, right? It would be NI, it would be TI, and that would be it. And a little bit of, FE in the middle. So I express a little bit, but more from a reaction standpoint. For other types, it's going to be their last function. For ENFJs, for example, it might be their TI, their last function. So what does that overall mean? It means that we can be ourselves in a way of, if I don't connect to another person in the world, if I don't connect to my environment, I can stay in my head. But the moment I want to connect with my environment, with the world, the moment I want to create like a healthy exchange of energy, I have to be complete. And complete includes the boundaries I set towards the world. And so I have to understand myself, and I have to understand that there might be this fantasy of mine that I don't have to be my complete self, that I can just be there and not set any boundaries and, just allow things to happen and to allow others to have the power over how I feel, what my narrative is, meaning they're going to be the director of my movie. And that feels like paradise. This is the fantasy. And we have to come to terms with the fact that a fantasy is exactly that. It's a fantasy. It's nice. It's something we can go into. It's something we can enjoy. It's not the way to go through life. And I wish it was, but it just isn't, because there isn't a person on earth that we can give all of that power to and they would act in a way that is good for us. There's no way, because every single person is uniquely themselves. And so they cannot know what our boundaries are. They cannot know when they're hurting us. And on top of that, even if they know that they are hurting us in some sense, maybe they have suffered themselves and therefore they're hurting you because they're hurting themselves. And so it's not about finding a person, and very often as INFJs, we can, do this with friends, we can do this with romantic partners, like those high stakes relationships. And we think, if I just find the right person, they're going to take care of me in this way. But it just doesn't work this way. You can't go through life and expecting another person to make you feel complete, because the only person who can make you feel complete is yourself. And so we allow others so often to have an impact on feeding our fantasy while we're feeding theirs. And so this creates like this unhealthy attachment and those codependent relationships. And we don't even aim to do that. Like, we actually go in it with the best of intentions. So we see another person and they're having self-sabotaging behavior. So that self-sabotaging behavior, again, can either be through doing things that are not good for themselves, like to begin with. That's how most INFJs act. Or their self-sabotaging behavior can be in the way of, I'm putting negative stuff to the outside, so I'm hurting people and therefore they're going to reject me. So it leads to self-inflicted pain. Again, just on top of that, they're hurting people in the process. But guess what? INFJs, if we're really being pushed to our extremes, we're going to, tell the truth in a harsh way, and we're going to hurt the other person as well. So it always leads to pain. It just feels like it's the perfect way for us to exert control. Again, I don't believe that most INFJs do this intentionally. I definitely didn't. I actually felt I'm a good person. I want to help others. I'm doing this because I want them to feel good about who they are. But the way they're acting is not healthy. They're not complete. They're living in their fantasy, and you're feeding that fantasy, and you're allowing others to feed your fantasy as well. And so it just becomes this notion of who can feed the fantasy more. And that person is going to be in control of that situation, which gives us this false feeling of, I'm not going to be rejected. Like, that person needs me, because who's going to make them feel as good as I can? Who can understand their fantasy so well and feed that fantasy for them to feel whole? But we're doing this while giving of ourselves. We're really doing this while depleting ourselves. This is not something that is sustainable. So as a result, what would be the healthy alternative? The healthy alternative would be to talk to a person in a way that would make them a complete version of themselves. That is the version. That is all them. And that person is complete. Very often, we have the wrong assumption that if we are complete, we're not good enough. And so therefore, we just want to be that version of ourselves that, doesn't really need to set boundaries, doesn't really need to tap into our extroverted sensing, meaning like, I'm not going to exert who I am, what I think, my real truth out there. That is not who I really am. Who I really am is like this person who can just live in their mind. And if you as an INFJ believe that who you truly are, including that, last function of yours. So us really living out our truth. If we believe that that version of us is like not lovable, is not acceptable, it's too weird, it's too aggressive, it's too hard, whatever it may be, we're going to project that on the outside. Meaning we're also going to look at another person and justify the fact that they don't want to integrate their last function either, right? So we're saying, I'm going to make you feel complete without you having to do the hard work. And the hard work is I actually have to show up as my complete self, because that's who I really am. And so we're continuously feeding others fantasies and are not aware that through that, we're really giving up our narrative. We're not really creating a sustainable system that will make us feel complete or whole or whatever it may be. Because every single time you do this, you allow another person to have impact on your narrative. They have an impact of your sense of self. And of course, it's an illusion because we're the ones who are allowing that person to influence us. And we have to understand that no matter who you have a connection with, so it might be your spouse, it might be your best friend, it might be family members, at the end of the day, there has to be a part of us that is really not up for debate. And we have to set that narrative. That does not mean that you can't make a compromise of, oh, I'm going to live in another city because, my spouse lives there. I'm totally fine with that. But that doesn't mean I'm giving up on who I am. But every single time you have to dim your light, you have to make yourself smaller in order to feed another person's fantasy so they can feed yours. You know that there's something that is out of balance. And so what is the solution here? Well, the solution is we have to really show up as everything that we are. And that is super scary. Because that means that I am aware that everything that I've been looking for my entire life is for my fantasy to come true. But your fantasy is exactly that. It's your fantasy. Reality is a different thing. And you can't move reality towards your fantasy, but those two things will always be two different entities. And the more you actually impact the world with who you are as a complete person, the more your fantasy will also develop. You'll actually fall less and less back into your fantasy, right? So all of those notions that we know about INFJs, being daydreamers, limerence, all of those things we talked about, they're always like a coping mechanism that is keeping us from actually engaging in the real world and creating long-lasting fulfillment. And so what does that look like when it comes to us acting towards other people? It's all about telling people the truth. And with that, I mean, if you see another person that wants to live out their narrative and they want to push it on other people, don't let them do this to you. Show them that this is not right. And you show them by making a choice that is better for you. So people will not learn to take the right steps for themselves, meaning being complete by us, enabling their fantasy. It's actually the other way around. We have to wake people up. We have to make people aware. And this all starts with us, that it is a fantasy. Your fantasy is beautiful. I love your fantasy. I love my fantasy as well. And I love the way you can feed my fantasy. But it's not reality and it's not sustainable. And no matter what, we have to really come back to the fact that who we are is not our fantasy. Who we are is all of us, and that includes the aspect that we have to connect with the world with. And for INFJs, this very often means setting boundaries, as in, I'm not going to allow you to create the narrative in my mind. I'm not going to give you the power of how I feel about myself. And that means also not giving away our power to other people who think we're like amazing. If we don't want to give other people the power to make us feel bad, we are also not going to give them the power to make us feel great. And that doesn't mean that we cannot show up in the world and allow others to amplify what we already feel about ourselves, but we can't really make it upon them to give us the feeling of how I want to feel about myself. And one of the aspects that is really necessary for us to show up in the real world and really be complete is, as I said, finding our inner ESTP. But more than that, finding an outlet to do good in a way of how can I be of service, from a place of my cup is overflowing. So I give of myself without expecting anything in return. And all of those situations when you are feeding somebody's fantasy, that is coming from the exact same place. We're doing this, yes, as a secondary reason because it's a form of control and we allow the other person to feed our fantasy and all of that. But mainly we're also doing this because we can, because there's something that we want to give that person, because we want to make that person feel good, because we want to inspire them by us being us. And so this is something that we have to bring out in the real world so we're not falling victim to actually putting it into somebody's fantasy. So that's why I'm always saying find people that you can help by you being yourself. And don't do it in like your high stakes relationships. So a business partner, a relative, a romantic partner, a really close friend. But find a way to help one way or another. And I promise you this will do wonders for you because it will give you a sense of, okay, I'm seeing the impact I'm having in the real world, not in somebody's fantasy, but in the real world while connecting with people, and still allows me to be an autonomous person that is not in need for somebody to feed my fantasy in order to make another person feel good. So always think of it. Every single time you were trying to make a person feel good in a way of, oh, I see what you're missing and I'm going to be the missing piece, think of it in a way of, I'm feeding that person's fantasy. And I hope that they're going to feed my fantasy, which is I'm going to live a complete life without actively having to take action towards creating the life that I want, right? Because it is hard to be complete. It is something that's going to require additional energy. It is something that is going to require effort because you have to mobilize yourself. You have to show up. You have to step out of your comfort zone. But it really is the path that allows you to create something that is sustainable because it is based on how you show up in the world. It's not something that can be altered by another person's perception of you. And so I think it's important to really categorize this entire aspect of feeding another person's fantasy and allowing other people to feed ours, to really look at it as the dark side of an INFJ because it can cause a lot of harm. It, leads us to depression very often. We are really giving away all of the control of how we feel about ourselves. And we have to change that narrative, not just for us, but also for the people that we love. So even if there are people around you that you're feeding their fantasy because you really have such a high opinion of them, you're not doing them any favors by feeding their fantasy. Because feeding their fantasy is not going to equip them to be in the real world. You are never going to be enough to feed another person's fantasy because the fantasy is not something that another person can fulfill. It might seem like it at first, but it's not. Because it's not something that is sustainable. Because every single time you have to give up who you are and you have to give up the path that is actually for you in order to make another person feel good, it just isn't sustainable because there won't be enough energy left for you. And we're in this hope of, we're just going to feed each other's fantasies and then everybody's going to feel good. But if you're not taking action in the real world, there's just not going to be any additional energy. At least one of you has to, connect with the real world in a healthy way to, create additional energy. So it's never really possible to create this overflow of energy that allows you to, simultaneously live in those fantasies. So we have to come to terms with the fact that our fantasy is beautiful. Our fantasy is amazing. I really think I could write novels about the fiction and the stories that have played in my mind. They're better than any movie I've ever seen. And there's so much heartbreak in that. And there's so much ecstasy and there's so much excitement. It's like, out of this world. But it is what it is. It's my fantasy. It's not the way my reality is because my reality includes those fantasies. It's not just this fantasy. And so when we really look at it from this perspective, we can create a healthy approach to how can I use the things that, inspire me in my fantasy to have a real impact with the people, that are in the world. And every one of them is coming from a different place. No matter what personality they are, no matter what gender they are, no matter, where they've grown up in. So we have to look at it from this perspective and really allow ourselves to integrate that entire version of ourselves, which includes the part of us that has to connect with the outside. So there has to be a part of you that I always say is not up for debate. It's a non-negotiable. It's something that you're never ever going to give up. It's a sense of self-worth. It's a sense of, understanding who you are. That's why the hermit mode is such an important part, because it allows you to cultivate that. But then we have to anchor it in the real world. So no matter who comes into our lives, we're not going to change that narrative because of them. So remember, if you want to learn how to set those anchors in the real world, how to really make that transition happen from being just in your mind to somebody who's like connecting it to what the world really is and creating this perfect synergy of all of that, then check out the poster on the INFJ Epic Life formula. And if you want to take it to the next level, then get the INFJ Epic Life audio guide. It really explains to you the steps that are necessary for INFJs to make that change happen. And remember, it's all about taking actions. Everything you need to know you can find in the links in the description. And if you want to watch another video now that is in alignment with today's topic, then check out the video you see on the screen right now. I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys.